everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mind Matters, Navigating Head Injuries and Concussions. I'm your host, Kylie Como. I'm the legal nurse consultant here at Shane Smith Law, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Michael Hennis, a doctor of chiropractic medicine and board-certified chiropractic neurologist at The Neural Connection, and Paula Walters, a veteran paramedic survivor and an advocate for domestic violence survivors everywhere. Dr. Hennis, Paula, it's great to be speaking with you today.
You as
Thanks
well.
for having me back.
As always, a pleasure, So for those of you in our audience who have tuned into any of our Mind Matters episodes before, then you know our focus here is all things brain injury, traumatic brain injury. So with that, we're going to get into it. You guys, let's just kind of start with some introductions. I'll throw it to you guys.
My name is Paula Walters. I am, I have a traumatic brain injury from domestic abuse and a near fatal strangulation. And I'm a speaker, a national speaker. I use what happened to me, my 13-year journey. Actually, interesting enough, it was 6 years today that I was out to my first visit to functional neurology where I got healing, and it's been an amazing journey since. So I've learned a lot about myself and lifestyle change and living life completely different with a brain injury.
So my name is Dr. Michael Hennis. I am a chiropractic neurologist, and I have basically made my career out of rehabbing brains, whether that's concussion, brain injury, migraine, vertigo, dysautonomia, you kind of name it. Yeah, we got this nice little practice in Minneapolis here, and always happy to work with Paula.
This, I think, is our first that I've hosted anyway. Our first interview with physician provider and a patient as well. So I'm particularly excited to speak with you all together. And so thanks again both for coming on. So let's dive in. Paul, I'm going to kind of point at you first. You know, some of our audience may recognize you. You've been on some previous episodes, had some great conversations. Paula, you've highlighted kind of how your injury wasn't really diagnosed, at least right away. So if you could kind of revisit what changed when, you know, kind of the light bulb moment hit for your providers when it was finally diagnosed correctly.
So really, so my incident happened in 2006, and it wasn't really until 2017 when I had a doctor by the name of Bill Smock kind of plant this seed in my head. Like, I think that instead of all these medical diagnoses that you have a traumatic brain injury or an anoxic brain injury from the strangulation. And I kind of went back to my neurologist about that and said something, and he's just, really just told me that can't possibly be something. You can't be having, symptoms now that are worsening from something that happened in 2006. So I researched that myself, and it really wasn't until I found a lady by the name of Amy Zellmer online, and I called the neurology place myself. And I traveled to Minnesota, and it wasn't until then that I actually got diagnosed correctly. And even to this day, even though I've worked with, Dr. Reese and Dr. Hennis, my regular neurologist will not, remove some of those neurological diagnoses that I have, especially the MS one, just because I do have to work at it. And I do have symptoms, and I've had to go back and see Dr. Hennis before or again. So he's really adamant that I do have the MS. So it's very frustrating, even though I have had amazing improvements. So it really does make you feel crazy that you can't, that you have two different arms of the medical system that won't kind of see the same thing in the same brain. So it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And thank you for reminding us of that. I guess that leads me toward you, Dr. Hennis. I'm sure you've seen it. Maybe you could speak to it. When concussions or traumatic brain injuries, whatever they're a result of, being frequently missed. But again, here, especially with Paula's case, like with the domestic violence or even so many of the non kind of force-related traumatic injuries you must see, why are these things so often missed?
I think the reason they get missed is concussion in particular, right? These mild traumatic brain injuries, we see them, we see the impact, we see the head bounce, we see whatever, and that's where the research and the money is realistically. And then in Paula's case in particular, we look at domestic violence and we focus so much on the glaring injury, right? The bruising, the laceration, the whatever, the physical trauma. Not to say you can't see stuff on a brain scan, but if there's nothing on a scan, well, it's not killing you, so you're not dying. So that puts you out of the realm of emergency medicine. And then it's kind of up to the knowledge of the providers you see. And That's not to knock anybody, right? Everybody's the consequence of their training. And if you haven't been trained in neurological rehab or functional injury, which is what a lot of these mild traumatic brain injury is, if it's not on a scan, there's nothing to treat. And that's just not really the case. I think it just comes down to the paradigm of who ends up handling it, right? If you have I already said it, but in Paula's case, where you have a strangulation or a battering or a domestic assault of any kind, it's the physical trauma, because that's the more dangerous in the moment. And I'm actually dealing with a patient right now where it's like she got run over by a car and everybody's very thankful she's alive, but now she's having some of these neurological fallout symptoms, and they themselves feel like they're backpedaling because everyone was happy I was alive, but now I have to go back and say, but I'm actually not thriving, if we want to put it simply. And I think that's tough for people, is to go back and ask for help after they're so thankful that they lived.
I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into that, Dr. Hennis or Paula. Please feel free to jump in. Kind of, we were talking about those missed, concussions, right? So talk about some of the red flags. We have a lot of providers that listen to or watch this show. Try to help out a little bit. What might some of those red flags often be, with a missed or misdiagnosed brain injury?
In my intake, the first thing I usually end up asking about is sleep since your injury. What is it like? Is it more? Is it less? We expect to see more, but as these things progress, we actually find that people have a lot more trouble getting to sleep. But then when they do, they'll sleep for hours, or I don't want to say days on end, but you have a lot of sleep and you just don't feel recovered when you're done. Emotional ability, so you're a lot more usually irritable, short-tempered, or just harder to get along with is kind of the other one. And that's really hard to put your finger on, especially yourself, if you're not looking for it. The people around you will probably notice, but they'll just assume, well, I'm tired, so I'm crabby. Okay, yeah, sure, maybe. But are you mean? Are you snippy? It's one thing to be crabby, but are you getting angry about stuff that maybe you shouldn't? I think the problem is when you have the delayed symptoms, right? So you start getting dizzy, you start getting headaches, you start getting tension headaches, you're getting gut dysfunction, right? Your digestion just isn't doing what it's supposed to. These things can pop up late. It's not uncommon for them to show up 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years later as your brain starts to decompensate. And this is kind of what happened with Paula, is I'm still having these symptoms and they're all just saying, well, you can't have that from that old injury. And that's just not true. What we find is that the brain can compensate really well until it can't. And everyone thinks, well, if you don't do anything, you're going to stay even keel right where you are. And that's not really the case. Really what you have is a slow decline in symptoms, but it's so slow that it's really hard to pinpoint that to an injury you had 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 20 years ago, right? That's a lot harder to nail down. So as far as red flags, it's the same stuff you would look at in an acute brain injury, but you have to probably expand your timeline. So when we do a history, it's not, well, you started having this symptom in January, what happened in December? It's like, okay, well, take me through your last 20 years of medical history. Give me the brief overview of anything that you deem significant, even if your other providers haven't. And then if there's a gap or a hole or something that seems significant, I'll ask you more questions. Do we have to go through every sniffle you've ever had? No, we don't. But there's usually some subconcussive impact or some mild round of antibiotics or something that will correlate that we can look at. But just not assuming that everything has to have a very short timeline of correlation, I think, is the biggest piece to see looking at these chronic issues.
Yeah, I think that I went out to see Dr. Hennis earlier this year, and the symptoms that I went to see him for were more emotional feeling symptoms. So I knew I was more irritable. I was having a harder time feeling what people would describe as anxiety and depression. I was having problems with my sleep, and then just the kind of the balance problems. But a lot of it was like emotional symptoms, which you can probably go to before I was told to go to a therapist and then put on meds, when now I know it's kind of brain related. So I went out there and he was able to help with that, and it was related to the brain.
There's overlap, right? There's never going to be we're not going to rehab you out of necessarily anxiety, depression, or that stuff. Therapy is still very important, but at the same time, it's stuff that you have to address too. So you kind of have to do both. And this is actually the tidbit on mine. So I've had previous concussions and my symptoms were almost all emotional and irritability. And I didn't realize that until well into treating concussions, that was more my problem. I never got dizzy, I never got headaches, I never got any of the classic concussion symptoms. But I remember in college, I worked at a retail job and there were 2 Mikes and I was Angry Mike. And it's like, oh, well, that would go inside. I don't like to think I'm an angry person, but apparently at that time in my life I was, so...
That's all very interesting. You talk a lot about the emotional lability. Some of those symptoms that might be harder for, many maybe mainstream practitioners or even family or friends to pick up on. So Paula, I'd love to hear from you. This delay in diagnosis and the symptoms that you experienced yourself, how did that affect your care, the relationships you had with family and friends, or your providers even, your day-to-day life? Love to hear about that.
Well, so for me, it's been a struggle in a lot of my relationships just along the way, like friendships and stuff like that, because I didn't know then that I had the brain injury. So kind of what that looked like was me having a hard time telling people off. And, I talk about when I speak about, losing my temper and throwing food in a restaurant and a lot of people asked the question if I was bipolar or had some, things like that. And I've had a lot of people walk away from me, people that were long time friends in those couple of years, especially right before 2019. I would say from like 2016 to 2019, it was really bad. I started battling with some thoughts and attempt at suicide. So, I really hurt people around me just because there was so much going on in my head, and I became a crier and a yeller, and sometimes my emotions didn't match what was being said to me, and just this complete emotional dysregulation. Whereas now I kind of have ways of, I still have it, just not as bad, but I also know how to prioritize sleep. That is my kryptonite, as Dr. Hennis has told me. And I make sure that everybody knows that. And the other thing is I will tell people like, hey, today's a day where I'm going to be super easily overstimulated. So people will not put on the TV, or being able to ask people to repeat things or to write things down. I think that understanding that has been able to help others kind of relate to me and be able to kind of work on those relationships. I'm very open and honest with people that I have a brain injury and that they're, these are my triggers. And, sometimes I just tell people like, I might need a little extra grace today. It's not a good brain day. And I'll just say that. So I think that understanding that, and that was probably one of the best things that I walked away from going to the Neural Connection, is the education on how to understand me and to kind of really help others understand me as well. So that was really important to me.
Wow, that's very insightful. And that gets me thinking that emotional rehab, right? So many times we think about, concussions, traumatic brain injuries, we think about the physical rehab, potentially, or maybe the cognitive rehab, but that emotional rehab, if you will, but helping patients to really understand what they're dealing with and then be able to verbalize those things to their families, to their support systems, to kind of start turning things around where those relationships are concerned. That's deep. I would imagine, Dr. Hennis, that's a pretty familiar story for you. What would you say? How do you approach that then, that effective, concussion rehab on all those fronts, cognitive, physical, if that's the case, or emotional, really? What does that look like, especially for these delayed cases?
Our exam is pretty long on the front end, and the first part of that is obviously getting a story. And one of my favorite things to say to people at the end of them telling me their story is, "You're not crazy." And it seems simple, but Paula, in particular, cases like yours where they're so long and drawn out, by the time you get to us, like, you need someone to tell you that you're not crazy. That doesn't mean you're not dealing with stuff. That doesn't mean we're going to get you back to 100% and you're not going to have some limitations. But knowing that you're not crazy, you're not nuts, because you've been called crazy once before, at least, by the time you make it to my office, typically. And just being validated in what you have is really the first step of that, right? And when the brain's involved, everything is on the table because your brain perceives it. It doesn't mean it's real. It also doesn't mean that it's in your head in the dismissive sense, right? It obviously is, because your brain's in your head and ha ha ha, funny joke. But getting after that and then helping people understand what's going on in the brain, why it affects them in the way it is, and then helping them understand how to communicate that, I think, is the biggest part of it. It's kind of like, I have this fun story about a patient early in my career before I was doing a lot of brain injury stuff. But he had all this knee pain and we couldn't figure it out, and he was terrified about it. We got an MRI and we found out he had an extra muscle. He had 3 muscles in his leg instead of 2. All right, cool. But one of them was wrapped around an artery. Nothing you're going to do about it. It's not a big deal, but his knee pain went away. I didn't do anything. He just had the information. And so having the information and being able to communicate it is very therapeutic for people because it takes away an unknown. So that's the first part about it. The second part about it is I'm not shy about telling people you need to be in therapy because you have a loss. It's a loss of self. You have maybe some PTSD. In an injury, that makes good sense. But if it was something like social anxiety or embarrassment, or because you're just not yourself and you're not proud of the way you acted, you still have to deal with that. And then meditation can be another piece. And there's 2 pieces to that. One is being able to identify what you're dealing with on an emotional level, and then being able to deal with it. But also, you can see on an MRI, you can see gray matter changes from meditation. It's actually therapeutic. You can see it on scans. And I haven't found a good way to convey this, but if you can see a change on a scan in a very short time frame, I believe it's 8 or 12 weeks, I forget what the actual number is, but you can see gray matter changes on MRI from meditation alone. That is unreal speed and change to see thickness change. So I'm not shy about getting people into those, we'll say, alternative therapies, or having them take it seriously, because everyone with some kind of chronic brain injury or issue has been told therapy at some point, but it's a punt, right? Go see therapy because I don't know what's wrong with you. I'm telling you to go see therapy because you have issues you have to deal with. And until you do, rehab isn't going to solve the problems. It's going to be a crutch, it's going to help fix, but you still got to deal with it, right? I tell people this all the time. I can be the best doctor in the world, but if you don't deal with your stuff, it ain't going to work. If you don't like me, it's not going to work. Doesn't mean someone else can't help you, but there's a couple things that have to align for therapy to actually work, for rehab to actually work.
Yeah, you touched on something very interesting. I think you spoke about alternative treatments, and we're starting to see, I think there is so much that is unknown about traumatic brain injury, especially, and I hate to use the term, it's a bit of a misnomer, that mild traumatic brain injury, because oftentimes they are invisible injuries. There's nothing that's going to show up on traditional scans and imaging and all that, but these new emerging alternative therapies that your practice and those forward-thinking providers like you are starting to deploy, you're finding success there. Paula, I would love to hear from you. What's that like to finally be in a place that's provided you with this structured plan for dealing with your injuries, for support and just your overall recovery process?
I think that the biggest thing that I have is I have hope again. So I often get asked, and this actually just happened to me the last speaking event that I had, is what was the biggest thing you gained from going to see functional neurology? And I said hope. So I went from being told that, here, take these meds, this is as good as it's going to get for you. We can maintain this possibly, but you're not ever going to be better, versus going there. And now now I don't take any actual prescription medicines. I take some supplements. I still have the symptoms. I have good days. I have bad days. I still have the emotional stuff. I have a lot of the stuff, but there's hope that I can maintain it. I know that if today's a bad day, tomorrow I can get up and, do things, get outside, be in the sun, exercise. I control. So a lot of my symptoms are under my control, my sleep. So it kind of gave me some power back, and there's just a freedom in it, knowing that I can kind of get out of what I put into it. Because, I was told at one point that I wouldn't see 50. I'm now 51. And if I did see 50, that, I had my driving privileges taken away, and my paramedic, and I'm back working and I'm back driving and I'm probably in the best health I've been. I still have a brain injury, but I have hope. And I think that that's one of the things that that I hear from a lot of brain injury survivors, are that you lose that hope because that you're never going to have the same life again. And yes, I'm a different Paula. And in many ways, I'm a much better Paula because I have addressed those past issues that I had. And, I've gotten better in changing the functional or the holistic stuff about my health, my eating and my whole life is better. And so I really thank Dr. Hennis and Dr. Reese for that, because I think I'm a better version of myself. And that's kind of a lot of the things that I learned from there.
That's quite powerful. I love hope. I love that you touched on that. I think, as my experience, previous experiences as a bedside clinician in neurosurgical ICUs, and even some of the work I did in the community with, vulnerable patient populations, hope was always such an important word. It's almost like you've got heart rate, blood pressure. Those are vital signs. I think hope almost should be viewed as a vital sign. I mean, when it's down, you're not doing well. But when somebody has hope, as you just so beautifully described, it changes things so powerfully. So amazing response there. I would love to hear, and this is for both of you, let's talk about, the major breakthrough. So you're in this treatment now, you're starting to feel hope. Well, I'd call that a major breakthrough. But were there any other major breakthroughs during the recovery process, physically, emotionally, that you all saw?
I'll leave this to Dr. Hennis, because I think I'll tell you the two things that I feel, and I don't understand anything of the doctor part behind it, but I think that learning the part, and this happened more in my last visit, I never thought about it that much, but I know I have, some cervical instability and in my ears, I move my head certain ways and I get those symptoms, but I can track now and I'm like, oh, it must be that. So kind of just learning that piece of it, how important, and I don't know if Dr. Hennis will kind of elaborate on this, but how important it is for my 3 friends to be telling the same story, and that when they don't, it just really makes for an ugly Paula. So I guess that would be for me. I don't know if you can kind of put that in doctor terms or better terms there, Dr. Hennis, but that's kind of, Sure. That's been my breakthrough, is understanding that.
So one thing we've kind of alluded to is that Paula's been out several times, and she's seen me, she's seen my partner, she's seen other functional neurologists in our area. And I want to iterate that although there is ongoing care, Paula is still very active, so she keeps injuring herself. So it's not that she has to keep coming back, it's because she keeps, we'll say, earning new rehab, let's put it that way. And she alluded to 3 friends. So we use an analogy in our clinic. Your brain's job is to tell you where you are. And it uses a couple of different senses to do that. It uses visual information, which is pretty self-explanatory. Can you see what's happening? It uses your inner ears, your vestibular system, which if you close your eyes and move around, you can feel that you're moving around. It's that sense of motion sickness, or just the ability to feel something moving, escalator, elevator, that sort of thing. And then there's muscles and joints, which are our basically sensors for gravity. How are you moving in your environment? How much stretch or load or something is on there? And if those 3 senses tell you the same story, then your brain's happy. So same thing, if 3 of your friends went to a party, you would expect them to tell you the same story of what was happening at that party, what kind of music was playing, who was there. I love food, so what kind of food was at the party, that sort of thing. And if one of those friends tells you a different story than the other 2, you're going to start to wonder if they were actually there. And that's kind of how we approach brain rehab with those 3 major sensors. There's more to it than that, and there's other nuances and whatever. But if one of those senses isn't telling the same story as the other ones, that's where you get this mismatch. Paul has kind of run the gamut of vestibular and visual and muscle and joint. Again, she's had multiple injuries and multiple different things going on, so we kind of work through them as they come. It's interesting because when your brain doesn't know where you are, you can have a vestibular issue in one person and a visual issue in another that cause identical symptoms. So it's not as if A problem, you do B rehab. It's not that straightforward all the time. And most of the time, there's some mixing between some systems. So we have to do visual rehab with vestibular or what have you. So there's multiple components to this. And then when you have a chronic injury like Paula, a lot of your support systems start to break down. We have to look at autonomic therapies, or we have to look at just reducing inflammation, or does your diet suck? Do we have to work on what you're eating so that you can actually fuel good rehab, kind of stuff like that. So yeah, it's just a matter of finding the right pieces of the puzzle and then putting them together in the right order.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I know Dr. Reese has been on a couple of podcasts or episodes before where he too discussed the 3 friends. I find that a great analogy, and just I think it's an easy way for a lot of our audience to really kind of, like you just said, start putting puzzle pieces together for themselves. So thanks for bringing that back. I think that's important. I'd like to know what, Paula, perhaps what do you wish maybe somebody had told you early on in your recovery journey that may have changed your trajectory?
Probably about the part about the MRI and stuff like that, that the head, just because I had pictures that clearly showed evidence of, facial and head head trauma. I had petechiae. So there was clearly injury there potentially to my brain. I wish that, Mike talked about a little bit earlier that there is this slow progression. I wish that I would have known earlier that could have impacted me so much. Honestly, I wish that I would have had someone to tell me a lot earlier that that I'm not crazy. Because that was the first thing that was kind of tossed at me a lot, was about always being the victim, and that domestic got used against me a lot, instead of, if I mentioned it, it was like, okay, well, you need to get over it. That can't happen. And I think that there just needs to be more awareness of that it can impact you so much. And I wish that people would have told me, I wish I would have known what I eat and the importance of sleep. I mean, I'm a paramedic. That's, when Dr. Hennis is talking about the what I do that keeps getting me head injuries, I'm a paramedic. We get tossed around in the back and stuff like that a lot. But, I wish that there's just so many things I wish that people would have told me, more, but like the food and sleep, 24, 48 hour shifts, I used to pick them up all the time, especially during COVID. My life wasn't impacted as much. We were working all the time on little sleep, and I did not know that was my kryptonite. And now I am like a routine to bed at 7:30, 8 o'clock, up at 4. And everybody knows if that doesn't happen for me, probably stay away from me the next day.
Right.
So those things, and just the emotional part, like the being told crazy is probably the number one, because it very much felt like I was, because I didn't understand the emotional dysregulation that comes with brain injury.
I don't think it should be lost on our audience to hear you say, that's what you wish somebody would have told you, or here you are. I think you talked about it, and the last time you were on, you've turned your pain, your struggle into purpose, and now you are that person telling people early on about those things that you wish you would have been told. So I think, again, always want to give kudos where it's due. Thank you for that. Dr. Hennis, from your perspective, what's something that you wish more providers or survivors perhaps might understand about brain injury recovery from your perspective?
I think what gets lost on a lot of brain injury is that we don't grow neurons. We do, but we grow them at such a slow rate that it's virtually useless, right? But what we can do is we can make new connection, right? It's called synaptogenesis or Hebbian theory or plasticity, right? Pick your term. And what that means is we can essentially change the real estate of the brain. So I can take this neuron and make it communicate with that one. And that's a function of repetition. What does this mean for a brain injury? It means that if there is an area of the brain that still functions, but it doesn't work as well as it should, just like a muscle, I can rehab it. The way we do that is different than muscular rehab, but it can still be done. Just like, we'll say, physical injury rehab, though, it doesn't mean I'm going to get you back to 100%, right? If you have a knee replacement, that knee is never going to be as good as the original God-given knee. It just doesn't work that way. Depending on the injury you have, we might get you back to 100%, we might get you back to 90%. And Paula has alluded to this beautifully. You have to own that. You are responsible. I like to think I do good work, but at the end of the day, I shouldn't say this about myself, but I'm a guru. My job is to point you in the right direction and teach you how to do it. Paula and I live states apart. Do we talk? Do we email? Does she come out once in a while when she really needs it? Yes, but those are last resorts. It's not my job to fix her. It is my job to fix her. But it's not my job to hold her hand and do it, right? We tell people all the time, like, you have to own your results, and I will help you get the best results you can. And I think that's kind of where it gets lost on the patient side of things, is people are used to doctors doing things to them or for them or what have you. You have to own those results to some respect. On the provider side of things, it's that you have to educate your patients to be able to do this. You can't just say, okay, well, change your diet and eat healthier. That's amorphous. It doesn't mean anything. What does that mean? What eating healthy for me might be totally different than what it is for you. And Paula, you talk about diet. We're still talking cutting edge stuff here, realizing that what we eat impacts how we feel. So that's always an uphill battle, but it's a big piece of it is understanding that all of these things are related, and you can't just discount a part of someone's experience with the world and say, well, it doesn't impact your brain, so don't worry about it.
I think you put that so well. Healthcare, wellness, it's a team sport, the provider and the patient working equally together, to do the things. I think the patient definitely has the lion's share of the work, as I think you so well put. So that's great. Thank you for that, Paula. We're kind of wrapping it up here, but I'd love to hear from your perspective. What is healing? That word healing. What does that mean to you now?
I've learned from going out to those doctors about, sleep, the meditation, the breathing, the difference between when I'm negative and you're around negative people versus being around, positivity and just all of these things. People will be like, oh, it's so expensive to go out there. And I'm like, man, I have walked away with a master's in me. I know my healing. I can, for the most part, fix me and know me day to day when I'm having problems. The times that I've had to go see Dr. Reese or Dr. Hennessy have been, one time I was in an accident. Actually, twice I've been in accidents with EMS, and then I had a really bad mold exposure. Those are three things that, I did what I needed to do, and then when I got stuck, I went back out there. But other than that, I really do have a master's in me. And so healing to me is I get to choose the me tomorrow, because I can tell you when I don't take care of my sleep, I eat gluten or dairy, those things give me brain fog. I know that. So when I think to myself, I'm going to have a cheat day, there's a repercussion. So my healing is on me, and I get to kind of, have a master's in me. And I know that probably doesn't mean much to other people, but that's what healing is for me, is that I get to do it. And again, I think that I am the best version of myself today. When the world seems like it's going crazy for everybody, I'm sitting over here with my dogs and my chickens and loving life. Even though I have the brain injury, even though I have all of that stuff, I have answers and I have a toolkit. The room that I'm sitting in right now is full of stuff that I use to be the best me.
I love that. Masters in me. That's really good.
What I've been telling patients lately is you are the expert in you. It's my job to take the information you can give me and figure out how to move you forward. But especially in cases like yours, where it's been so long, you're the one that knows what you feel. We have to decipher that and kind of go from there. There's also something real about what you said about, when you have a cheat day. It's I'm not a monk, right? I tell people what to do all day long. Here's what you should eat. You should cut this out. You should do that. You should make sure you get your sleep. You should blah, blah, blah. I'm a human too. I get it. I don't do well when I eat certain things, and I do it. If I stay up late, I know I'm going to be tired and crabby, but I do it because we have friends in town or whatever it is. You don't have to be perfect. It's that 80-20 principle. Maybe sometimes with a brain injury, it's got to be 90-10 or 95-5. You got to, own the results you get and play the cards you're dealt, and you got to play them to the best of your ability sometimes. Yeah.
You just have to trust yourself. I've come to you and I've always had that gut feeling, that I wasn't as sick as what they were telling me, and I hear that from people all the time who share their stories with me, how they don't feel that, their diagnosis is them. And trust yourself, because look, it changed the trajectory of my life, getting the right diagnosis, and I'm off all those meds.
Most of the time when Paula and I talk now, she already knows what she needs to do. She just needs someone to convince her to actually do it.
Love that. That's amazing. You guys are great. And this has been a fantastic, this is one of my favorite interviews so far. So really, really appreciate that. Is there anything else you all would like to talk about?
If you're struggling and you have an injury and you're being told you're nuts, or that this is just the way it is now, or there's just nowhere to go, all that really means is you have exhausted that provider's knowledge. The medical system is very good at saving a life and keeping you alive and very acute care, but they're really currently bad, and they are catching up, I will say that, with keeping us healthy, right? There's movements happening right now, regardless of how you feel about them, about trying to make things work better. But there's a lot of stuff out there, and there's a lot of alternative, quote unquote, alternative therapies out there that do work. They all serve a purpose. And if they didn't work for you, it means that wasn't your issue, and maybe we didn't test it well enough before we tried it. But everything's got a place, and if applied appropriately, all of it does eventually end up working. But that's kind of the catch, is you have to do it appropriately. If you're being told that I don't know what's going on with you, which usually comes out as you're crazy, you should go see psych, if I put a pin in it, it just means that you've exhausted that provider's knowledge and you need to find another one. And hopefully there's someone near you. And if there's not, make a phone call, send an email. We can try and find somebody near you. Don't give up. This is kind of the point I'm trying to make.
Don't give up. I think that's a perfect way to cap the conversation. I think that's very succinct. Thank you. Well, that's going to wrap it for another episode of Mind Matters, Navigating Head Injuries and Concussions. Once again, I'd like to thank today's guests, Dr. Michael Hennis and Paula Walters, for joining us today and sharing their knowledge and insight and passion with us. You can find Dr. Hennis at the Neural Connection via their website for more on their services, and Paula on her website, The Courageous Survivor, for more about her story and links to her other powerful content. I hope that our audience has enjoyed this enlightening and really thought-provoking discussion as much as I have, and is walking away with a deeper understanding and appreciation of what recovering and living and thriving with a brain injury might look like. Please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button to our channel and keep up with our latest content. Leave us a comment today and let us know what you thought of our discussion. And as always, remember, if you're in pain, call Shane at 980-999-9999. Thank you.
In pain, so I call Shane. 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.